Over the course of 5 hours late last night, 79-year-old Donald Trump posted online more than 150 times publicly. Daily Beast explains that in a lot of those posts, Donald Trump targeted his usual perceived enemies, people like Governor Gavin Newsom, former Speaker Nancy Pelosi, former Presidents Barack Obama and Joe Biden, former Director of the FBI Jim Comey. He called some of those former elected officials and government workers traitors again. He complimented guests who had appeared on Fox News in close correspondence to the time that he posted. Trump also repeated or reposted a lot of things, a lot of the usual right-wing MAGA content, boosted it with his retweets. He shared some videos of himself. In one of them, he insults a female journalist, and another one includes footage of his little cameo in the film Home Alone 2 from the year 1992. At one point last night, Donald Trump was firing off more than one post a minute. I want to bring in MS Now senior White House reporter Vaughn Hilliard. So, Vaughn, if any public figure in the world of sports did that, there would be, you could imagine ESPN or Bill Simmons asking about their state of mind or what was going on in their life. When Kanye West does that, we usually get some sort of reporting out or reaction from the mother of the children he shares, Kim Kardashian. I mean, this is bananas, off-the-wall stuff, the rate of posting. How is Donald Trump doing?
I think it's a good point you made. I mean, Lane Kiffin tweets a couple times a day, and the amount of scrutiny that each of those tweets get is much more than the 160-plus posts over the course of those 3 hours last night. And I think when you're talking about 160 posts, you pulled out a few examples. Another one, him claiming that Michelle Obama used the auto pen at the end of the Biden administration. He also posted this idea that Elon Musk helped thwart the 2024 election from being stolen because Musk, quote, tracked down the IP addresses of the Dominion office in Serbia and rendered their computers useless days before the election. He also then went on to suggest in a post there that he reposted that there would be a military tribunal for Barack Obama. When you ask what the state of the president of the United States is, I think it's important the context that just 4 minutes ago, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff wrapped up a nearly 5-hour-long meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. But we haven't heard the president of the United States get into the details about any terms of a negotiated peace plan between Ukraine and Russia, essentially leaving it to cabinet members to go forward with those negotiations. All at the same time that this morning, his press secretary in the White House, that they promoted this New York Post story that the president is working 12-hour days, according to White House logs, and that he is keeping a busy schedule despite what others in the media are suggesting. There was a 2-hour-long cabinet meeting today, and it was a 2-hour-long cabinet meeting, but the cameras did catch his eyes drifting downward every so often there.
I think we have
this
that.
Is a moment here for the White House for that. Yeah. For the scrutiny around the post in his late night hours there. I think that there's also the question about the roles that his cabinet members are playing in negotiating these critical negotiations and conversations at the same time that over the course of last night, we were watching these True Social posts roll in there, Nicole.
It's amazing. We're going to put a pin in that for future discussions. He seemed to have outed Elon Musk's role in somehow meddling in the Dominion voting systems. That's interesting.